This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Welcome everybody to the ad hoc building committee meeting of the Council on Aging. Dan Rist, our co-chair for this meeting, will be keeping time and moving us along and using the official meeting rules. And I will be keeping us flowing with our content and admitting people. So the first thing that we're going to do is take attendance. So Leslie is remote from home, so it would be really helpful if everybody just stated your name so she can take attendance. So Cynthia Terrell,
Joe Banis,
Sandy Eddy,
Dawn Gratian Moore,
Paproff,
Dan Rist.
and Leslie's remote. And then we had Tom Brown and Chuck Connor could not be here today, so they called in an absence. Let me admit this person.
Mhm.
And it looks like we have a guest, Cameron Lucier. Oh,
Crystal.
it's Crystal. So Crystal Cody Stows is here as well. Okay, so let's just, so then absent are, oh, and Stella. So both Tom, Stella, and Chuck all gave us previous notice they would be absent. So that's everybody. And I see that we don't have any members of the public here today. So let's move on to the minutes. Our February meeting was canceled because there was a snow day. And so we're going to look at the January minutes. Leslie. Let's go back.
So I'm not sure I can share my screen with you, unfortunately.
Yeah. Make her a host.
We have to make you a host.
Oh.
That's okay. But let me just ask, did everyone see the minutes from January?
They were fine to me.
Did anybody have any questions about the minutes from January? Leslie, I just added you as a meeting host, so you should be able to hit the little up button and share the minutes with us. Give her a moment.
Here we go.
Okay. So when you get a chance, Leslie, you can scroll down to the content of the minutes. Okay, so we talked about the workload, the meeting schedule, we elected the officers, and we said that in February we would talk about guidelines for public speak, drafting the responsibilities of officers, defining what the vision process would be, elements of a needs assessment, talked about putting out a press release. Oh no, we talked about the press release. Anybody have any changes they want to make? Dan, you want to do the?
I move that we accept the minutes from January 9th.
Second,
All in favor? Well, we have to do it because we have members video. You have to do it by roll call. That would require me to remember everybody's name.
you will soon enough.
And you.
Well, this would be a great chance. Pat,
I abstained because I wasn't here.
I forget your name.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't here too.
But you can tell me your name.
I'm Dawn.
Dawn.
I'm Dawn.
And your name?
Sandy.
Sandy says yes.
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Cindy says yes.
Leslie?
Yes.
And that's Crystal.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Good job, Dan.
Okay, all right, that's the minutes. There's no members of the public here, so we won't move on to public speak, but we welcome the public to come at another time and speak with us.
I have a question.
Yes, Dan?
I think 5 minutes total might be a little too little.
Yeah.
The council, and that's the only reference I have, never put a limit on it.
Mhm.
Rarely did put a limit on it. It depended on what the subject matter was. For instance, if there was real controversy, the chair might say, well, we're going to give 30 minutes to this with 2 minutes, 3 minutes, etc. I think it should be dependent on attendance. I don't think we should keep it to just 5 minutes, only because people get angry when there might be 5 people here and that's 10 minutes. If you give each one of them 2. So we're going to eliminate 3 people. I would recommend that we do not use that 5 minutes total and allow the chair to make a decision at the time of the meeting. I mean, I hope we don't have anything controversial at the city council, but I think you should let everybody speak who might show up.
And just to clear, so would you still do 2 minutes per person, but just not cap the amount of minutes?
No, we do
Total?
2 minutes per person.
I meant, so 2 minutes per person, but you wouldn't cap how many?
We cap the
total?
entire
Okay.
public speak section to 5 minutes.
Gotcha.
I would oppose that only because our meetings are generally an hour. We're scheduled for an hour, whereas the city council meeting was as long as it took. So if we get 15 people in here that want to do 2 minutes apiece, we're going to open the meeting, do that, and close the meeting.
Well, on the
So
other hand.
that's my only thought on that.
Let me,
Yeah.
can I respond?
Yeah.
At the time of the meeting, you see 15 people who want to speak.
Okay.
You can say, we're only going to do 1 minute today.
Oh, okay.
You can change it. Because open meeting law does not require public speak. It
Okay.
is up to the chair to decide, up to the committee to decide how long it would be. So in other words, that's what I meant. Let's
Okay.
do it by situation.
Okay. That makes
You had a
sense.
comment?
My comment was, I was the person who drafted the public speak minutes for the Council on Aging. And basically, it was set up, they were drafted with the Council on Aging meetings in mind, given the fact that we had a 1 hour meeting and we rarely, if ever, had people coming.
Right.
But I like the idea of giving the chair more freedom at the moment.
Yeah.
Because we don't, you know, if we had people coming in looking for 15 or 30 minutes, that's half our meeting.
Right.
Well, and then if you have 15 people, the chair can say, well, because we have a lot on our agenda, we're only going to give a minute. Please be brief, and we'll be very strict.
Yeah. And one of
Put up a minute and bang the gavel.
one of the other things is we sort of tried, if multiple people wanted to speak, we tried to find out whether they were speaking on the same topic. In which case, if people wanted to, you know, chime in on the same topic, I think we could limit that to one person. But you're right, you know, that I think giving the chair the flexibility to do that is the best way to go.
Does the committee want to open the public up per agenda item? Because I think it should be public speak and then limit discussion to members only for agenda items. Sometimes in our subcommittees at the council, if we had an agenda item, we would start talking, we would allow the public to speak to that agenda item.
Yeah, that
But
was
I don't
against our
recommend that
rules.
because
That
if
was
we're only
against
going to
our
do an
rules.
hour, then that'll make it difficult.
Let me ask if anybody who's attending remote, Leslie or Crystal, wants to contribute to this conversation, because we're pinging back and forth.
Can you go back over to that?
Oh,
for us?
yeah, sorry.
I think it should be left to the chair's discretion, because I feel like if there's people that are coming out based on what's on the agenda and they're not allowed to stay through the meeting to hear the information that the committee is discussing, that might make people upset as well. But if people are going to get their answer from the fact that we're talking about it on the agenda, then they could be welcome to stay through the meeting, and we might not need to have them speak during the public speak session. So that might limit the people that are speaking, but that's just my opinion.
I'm not sure, Crystal, if you meant that people after they're done public speaking have to leave the meeting. We can't kick them out of the meeting. They stay.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay, good. That was what I misunderstood then. Thank you.
So to clarify, so the rules that the Council on Aging that we were going to use as a starting point for this, are that if the item is on the meeting agenda, you may not speak about it in public speak. Public speak is only for items that are not on the agenda. And what we do is if people come and they're interested in an agenda item, we sometimes entertain conversation and questions from the people in the room, but typically they're the friends of the Council on Aging, and we want to hear from them and we make time to hear from them. It's not, so it is a little bit different. So what I'm hearing is that, oh yeah.
One clarification.
Mhm.
When you said we can't speak to items that aren't on the agenda, you meant the members. Because they could talk about whatever they want on public speak, they being the public.
Right.
So in other words, if a public person said, are you guys going to do this and that? And Joe wanted to respond, if it's not on the agenda, you can't. Because it wouldn't allow other people to speak. But if it's on the agenda, the other part of your statement is, do we want back and forth? Now, the city council doesn't do that, but we can.
Correct. I was gonna say, yeah, I totally knew where you were going with that because the way she said it was not the way you said it. But go ahead, Joe, because I think you're gonna say the same thing as that. The council doesn't allow, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The council doesn't typically allow for a back and forth with the public. But we're allowing it. So he just
I'm
wants to
asking
be
if we wanna
clear.
do that.
He just wants to be clear because that is where we come up with, hey, if it's on the agenda, we're going to talk about it and we'll hear from you at that point.
Yeah.
They don't do that at the council. That's not allowed. So he just wants clarification. Are we going to do that versus?
At public speak time.
Right.
In other words, if there's an item on the agenda, whatever the item is.
Yeah.
And somebody asks Joe, public asks Joe, what do you mean by this? We're allowing members to respond because it's on the agenda.
We're allowing their members to respond during the meeting.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
During the public speak
Yeah.
section. We're not going to allow public speak during the agenda topics when we're discussing.
We are. That's what we're saying.
That's what we're saying. We're saying the
That's what we're
opposite.
saying.
We're
Oh,
saying
okay.
that the members,
That's what
we're
we're saying.
saying that public speak is for if you wanted to bring something to the group, we will guide you. If it's on the agenda, wait. We will get to that on our agenda.
So we're
And then-
allowing public
and then we-
discourse during the
Right,
agenda.
but we reserve the right to cap that because we need to keep our meetings moving apace. So if we have 10 people come in who want to talk about one of our items, we'd have to think about that. Yeah.
The reason that we had the rule that we had for the other council meeting was once we had someone came in on public speak who was, in my opinion, trying to bait one of the committee members into this discussion, and the committee member was attending remotely, and in my opinion, they fell into that trap, and I couldn't get these two combatants separated. And so that's why, at least in the Council on Aging Board of Directors, we would not encourage that sort of dialogue between members and the public. If somebody wants to speak, we're happy to let them speak and to take note of what they say, but we don't want to, or at least we didn't upstairs, want to get involved in that sort of back and forth dialogue. I mean, because we aren't the city
Are
council.
we allowing that? I'm confused. I thought we were.
I am too. I'm confused.
I thought, in my opinion, if they ask a question, we should be able to answer it. But in my opinion,
During the
we need
meeting.
it during the public speak time. I'm only saying that because it could get really long during agenda items. If someone comes in and says, I want to speak to agenda item 14 on the public speak. Joe, can you tell me why, or whatever?
Mhm.
You could respond because it's on the agenda. But it can't be a debate. It is an answer to a question. On the other hand, we could say, no,
Sure.
we don't want it. My opinion, we could allow it during agenda items. But I think that runs the risk of a long section of that agenda and we don't finish.
Yeah, it's sort of, and what distinguishes, oh, pardon me.
I was just gonna say, so I've seen it happen differently at ordinance, from city council, from here. So, and each committee can set up their own procedures. We did say we would address that at a future meeting. We were going to
We're supposed
address
to do
it
it
in
in
February. The problem is we have a good sized agenda to get through today and it's 12:16. So I'm wondering, how much does the group want to continue this right now? Or do we want maybe a couple of people to take the established Council on Aging public speak rules and maybe sit down with you, Dan, like maybe a member of the Council on Aging board and Dan, and kind of think through this and then bring it back to us, because our terminology is all over the place and I'd rather see it worked on and then brought back for a decision. What do you think?
I'm happy to, if Joe sends me what the rules are for the board agenda, I could respond to the, can't do it for the full committee. That's against open meeting laws, but I could work back and forth with Joe and then we can make a recommendation. Sort of a subcommittee of this.
Yeah.
Sure,
Okay.
sounds good.
That would
Yeah,
be,
great.
thank you so much for bringing your expertise, Sandy.
It's always an hour though, right? That's all we have.
Typically.
We can make it longer.
Oh,
And the room is reserved for longer if we need it, but we promised ourselves that we would only go longer with advance notice. Yeah, so we're sticking to 1 PM unless we've planned to go past 1 PM.
All I can say to that is, I'm sorry. I'm breaking my own rules. I should raise my hand.
Dan?
I think we should think about that. One of the things maybe we could talk about is making sure that we get the topics done, because we only have one meeting a month. If it's a long agenda, as you say, for today, we should consider just finishing. None of the committees I was on ever had a time limit of, we would put it in, now the Google Meet might want to say 11 to 2, just to make sure that people know it could be as long as that. But I think you should just get the agendas done. Unless you're gonna say, all right, we have to leave at 1 o'clock, we're gonna have a new meeting, March something to finish. That's just me.
Does anybody remember Dan stating specifically that he needed advance notice to stay past 1 PM? And there was a certain family member that would want that advance notice.
I said that?
We were responding partly to
I
you.
have Joe Biden's memory, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, all right.
You're
So
not
I will
yelling
just,
enough.
I will just say, from somebody who is on a work schedule still,
There you go.
the time frame for me, an hour is great. I can be flexible, but today at 1 o'clock, I'm out of here because I have a
Yeah.
meeting. I have a meeting at 1 o'clock. It just happens to be next door, so I don't have to go far.
And to remind everybody, this room is reserved for twice a month. And we have, that ability. We can
Yeah.
meet the second Tuesday and the fourth Tuesday.
I apologize,
So-
Pat. I thought everybody was retired like me.
That's okay.
So
Lucky.
Dan, do we need to make a proposal to move from one agenda item to the other, or are we less
No,
formal
it's up
than
to the
that? And I
chair.
can move on. All right, I'm going to move on from this, and we know that we're going to continue working on it, and I'm just going to switch back to the agenda. Thank you, everybody, for your input. It is important, and it will come up. All right, so the next item is report out on any research completed by members to date. If you independently have been doing any research at City Hall, in other communities, on your own, this is a time for you to come back and let us know what research have you done that you're ready to share with the committee that might help the committee before we move on to our next item. And if there's nothing, that's okay.
So we can go I'm sorry, we can go individually? I didn't realize that. We don't have to go in a group or?
Okay, so just to clarify, what I'm talking about is, we didn't yet make our formal working groups. We're gonna do that today, but I happen to know that some people are, very educated about this kind of work that we're doing and may have gone and done some research. And a little birdie told me that, somebody was doing some kind of research. So this is just, and that person might not be here today. So does anybody have anything they want to share right now about work that they've already done looking into whatever things. Yeah. Dan,
I just want to say, Joe, I looked over your center site visits and they're very informative. But the only one really that gave us any sense of what is in their center is South Hadley's. But I found that to be enlightening. And then when we go around this time, because this was mostly about process, how much did it cost, how did you go about developing the project, whatever. But I think when we go around now, we're going to look at what do they offer in their senior center to seniors, what facilities, so that we could, because this one is great. Rooms in senior centers are as follows, what's on the South Hadley one. What is also nice to see, it only costs 9.8 million, and South Hadley, according to my friend Omar, is a fantastic senior center. So I just wanted to say that I love this report. Thank you.
thank you, Joe. Joe authored that
I was
report.
not, I mean, you were there and Tom was there. So.
And just so you know, some of the centers, people were present for certain parts of the conversation and not others. So somebody might have had to leave, like say a board member, but then maybe Dawn and I got a tour from staff on the quote building program, like how are the spaces actually being used? And then newsletters are an incredible resource to see what are they offering. Ludlow every day practically posts what are the different rooms and what's happening in the different rooms. So,
You just go to the city's website and look at senior center.
so
How do
I'll.
we get to these?
Yeah, we will share, I can share, some of the resources with the whole group. Go, Joe?
No, on.
Okay, so let's thank you so much, Dan, for reading that and ingesting it and using it.
Oh.
Joe?
Just a real quick comment. When I first got involved with this, I had no knowledge of anything about senior centers. So the first couple of visits, and they may, like in Wilbraham, they may not have had a senior center built. They may, I think they were in the process of having one built. So there was nothing really to see other than maybe a hole in the ground or something like that. So we didn't know what information was relevant. So I tended to write a lot of, stuff that made sense to me.
Yeah.
Now, did I miss things? Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But
Okay.
you'll catch
Oh, I
it on the
wasn't
next,
criticizing. I just-
go round.
It was great to see what you did because process is what we're primarily dealing with now anyway.
Yeah.
As well as a vision of what we're going to do.
Well, this is a great segue to move on to our next agenda item. Okay. So work groups. We had already decided that we would have work groups. I went ahead and tried to delve into what types of work groups and maybe a rough draft of who could be on these work groups. Please excuse me for being so forward. It was just to kick it off and get us started. So site selection, meaning where's this thing going to sit in Easthampton? Visioning process, which means the meetings that meetings we're talking about having in 2024 into 2025 to help people visualize what they want out of a new center that would be facilitated. Center visits, which we were just speaking about, that we would do more center visits. And then building program, which is what are the uses of the senior center, what goes on inside that center that we are doing now, what's missing, what do we want? We already have a building feasibility study that speaks to what are we doing now and what do we need? Well, extending that into what could be in a future building using the expertise we have now, but also as that information is coming in from the visioning process, incorporating that in as we go. And then also looking at best practices of senior centers, which is an emerging field.
So you have a diagram, or you have something in writing that we can look at and say, okay, this is what we need. This is how big it should be, or how many rooms we should have.
We have the
None of
beginnings.
that.
With the beginnings of it are, what do we have now?
Right.
And what do we at a minimum need? Like, how is it not functioning now? but this group would be then taking that steps further. So here are the people that I initially thought of for these different groups. Site selection, Sandy had a strong interest in where is this going to go? Tom, as we know, Tom Brown, he already wants to be on the site selection committee. Patrick, I think you had been interested in that. And of course, Chuck Connor, that's his expertise in real estate and development. So in terms of site selection, did I miss anybody who has a driving interest in site selection? It's already about 4 people. Leslie and Crystal, do either of you have a driving passion to be involved with site selection? Okay. Dan?
How many people are on this committee total?
There are 11 total, plus we can harvest more people from the Council on Aging Board.
11 official members.
Yeah, 11
We're still
members.
following open meeting law. So we can't have more than 6 on any one of these visits.
Right.
So if I was going to ask, could I join Tom and Pat on one of these site selection? And if there's 3 more people there, violating.
Right.
So we shouldn't do that. I mean, in other words, let's keep it to the group that's there, but
Right.
I would suggest that if this is your thing, you could give us some minutes of your subcommittee.
Yeah.
and-
Yes.
I mean, you're going to inform us periodically about what your group's doing.
Absolutely, yes.
It's not going to be done in a,
And before we move to
Okay.
Sandy, just to clarify what we did last time, because we realized that when we were visiting sites, yes, we needed to take notes, but also we made a rule for ourselves that we weren't having like basic,
Is that doing that?
they're still here,
Okay.
but there's something about the connection that's failing to the
Do you want me
big
to go grab
screen.
Andy?
So those wires, make sure they're connected all.
Oh, this one came out.
There you go.
I think, is it helping?
It did for a second.
This isn't going in far enough. Doesn't seem. Good. It just,
There you go.
did that help? No, it didn't.
Yeah, it popped it back at least.
Bear with us, you folks are still here. We're just trying to get the big monitor working.
Where's that remote? Do I have?
And we're still being recorded for the public while this is happening, so I'm
There you go.
There you go.
It is that connection.
It is this, okay,
And it's probably is this the city's computer or your?
no, it's the cities. Okay, so moving on, and then we can check in with Andy about that technical difficulty later. So just to clarify, when you are away from this group, visiting other centers, you are going to gather information and report back to the committee, but you're not having conversations that should be had at the committee, because we decided at the Council on Aging Board that leads you to becoming an exclusive group, having side conversations that we all want to have together. And so we disciplined ourselves that we were information gathering for the committee, and not jumping ahead is what we did as part of the Council on Aging Board. What do people think about that?
It's gonna be hard.
Dan?
It's gonna be hard for me to not say, oh, I really liked what they offered there. I mean.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the kind of conversation I'd have. What do you think of the gym they offered or something like that?
Right.
I think we can
Right.
talk about that while we're visiting,
Right.
because that's the reason we're going.
Right. That's
I'm
different.
just saying that discipline is gonna be hard on me.
No, but that's different. That's different than a team of, say, 4 of the 11 of us basically deciding what they want as like a group and then ramming it through. You know, this group is meant for conversation, and then that will go to the next building committee anyway. We're not a decision-making group. So, you know, it was, Sandy?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be on that visit, the center visits. I don't think I can help too much with
Okay.
the site selection.
Okay, so let's look at that list again. Patrick?
No, it's gonna have you turn the camera on because it turned off.
Turn
Go back
the
to,
camera
go back to the meet. On the bottom, so it's off. The red turn on. See if it comes back on. There you go.
Thank you.
No,
Okay.
I didn't think they could see us, so
Okay.
that's fine.
All right.
It's a wide wrangle too.
I know, I saw that.
Okay,
Went
so
from-
Leslie, would you
Who knows?
please, in your notes, state that we're going to move Sandy off-site selection and on to center visits? So Dan,
I'd like to be on center visits
and
too.
Dan would like to be on center visits. I didn't assign you to anything because I didn't want to presume.
You
I
assigned me to
don't know you
visioning.
well enough. Did I assign you to visioning? Oh, I did. Okay. I forgot my thought process. Okay, so let's skip over visioning and talk about center visits. So Leslie, just to clarify, site selection is Tom, Patrick, and Chuck. Center visits is Dan, which is a great idea because you haven't gotten to do it yet. Leslie hasn't gotten to do it, which is why I put her on there, but I put Joe on even though he has done it because he's become an expert in interviewing the directors and also, keeping this big spreadsheet. Joe, do you want to continue with visits? You could switch to something else.
Actually, I was tempted to go back to the visioning piece of it.
Oh, well, that'd be.
We'll just switch
that'd
Joe
be-
with me.
That'd be great. Well, let's move. So let me just say that we're taking this to the Council on Aging Board next week, just to give them an update on what we're doing over here. And we had said that for these work groups, this group had decided we could bring on people if they had a special expertise or interest to be on our work groups and they didn't have to sit on the larger committee. So we could invite, there are some skilled people on the Council on Aging who might be good for us to have join with center visits or another part of this. Okay, so then the visioning process. In terms of creating meetings that are facilitated, we would have funding for that with the community, at least one of them. So this group would plan out with a facilitator, how should those meetings go and what information do we want to collect? But this committee, the whole committee will discuss that, but this group would do the work behind the scenes to bring that. So I would like to be involved with that. I know Stella had an interest in it, but she's not here today. And then Joe, you're interested in that.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I understand what this visioning process is, we're going to hire a facilitator at some point.
Yes.
And then you're going to work out subcommittee.
Yeah.
Will work out the details of when those
Yes.
facilitating groups are going to be.
Yeah.
And how we invite people to respond. We're going to invite seniors to say, what do you want in a senior center? Is that what this is?
And to talk about who the facilitator might be, although I'm doing some background work on that
No, I was going to say this, the way I would see this is part of the overall marketing effort. I mean, and part of that would be looking at who are the different constituent groups in the city who would have an interest in it. I mean, seniors in general, sure, but there might be some ways to sort of like further subdivide those people so we know who they are. And then trying to take a careful look at what are their interests. What are they looking for or what are they looking to avoid? There may be a group here that's violently opposed to this because of the tax issue. So in other words, to work with these people, we have to know what their interests are and then put together programs that try to, I don't want to say mollify their interests, but, try to, show that A, it's not going to be as bad as you think, and B, there's some benefits that you haven't considered. So,
Dawn. Yeah.
So with the visioning process and the building program, I'm wondering if there's some overlap there, because I think as part of the building program, there's what we have now, but there's also research and imagining what we would need. But I think also, I know from my perspective, I would like to know from the community what they feel like they need, and not as a decision maker one way or another, but I think that's an integral part of defining the future and also having buy-in to the future is having community feel like they're part of that. So I just want to make sure there was some overlap in those two.
Let me clarify.
can I just address that for a
Yes.
second? One of the things that I'd be concerned about is we visited a number of different centers. I don't know if you picked up on this, but it's almost like the staff space in those centers was almost like an afterthought. Well, we have a little bit here and a little corner there, and we can put everybody in here. And I'd like to make sure that, space for your organization is sufficient, because you need, you're trying to do your work here, and we don't want to put you into a modern version of the old post office.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I just want to make sure that part of the visioning process is also the visioning of what the community feels it needs as a piece of the pie of what we're planning.
Let me clarify.
Sure.
I think we're confusing things. That's the building program. The discussion you two are having is part of the building program. The visioning process, I should have called it something else. I should have called it development of the visioning sessions. Strictly, it's just about getting these visioning sessions to happen.
Perfect.
The logistics for them, make sure they happen, and then cleaning up afterward with, here's all what we gathered, and being able to bring it back and share.
Data collection.
Whereas what we want to see in a senior center, let's move on to the next part. Well, first, let me just say, for that, creating those visioning sessions does involve marketing of those visioning sessions and not of the bigger project. And I would like to recruit from the Council on Aging Board, Kathy Schweitzer, who has experience in that area, and see if she could join, because I don't think we have enough people on that logistics section.
Okay, so the building program, Joe, it's sounding like to me, maybe you would be more interested in being on the building program work group than on just setting up these visioning sessions and helping.
I could see that as two separate things.
So would you rather be on the building program, in other words, researching best practices in senior centers, looking at our current senior center and having expertise in a small work group to basically take information that's coming from these visioning sessions, take research, take what our staff are talking about, and move forward on being able to make a proposal at the end to this group or along the way to this group, but at the end to a formal appointed building committee. Look, folks, you're going to be in charge of making a new senior center happen, but this is what we want it to look like. Obviously that's going to go to the Council on Aging Board. It's going to get talked about at staff meetings. It's, but it's a place to start doing some of that. And the people I thought of for that were Crystal, with her long experience in both senior centers and in assisted living and gerontology and social work. Dawn, who is basically the staff person creating our programming. And I would like to be on that, but I don't have to. And then, a community member, and Joe, you're a good example of a community member. Does Dan comment?
Yeah, I think you should be on it because you're the professional. You know what programs, I'm assuming you've been elsewhere besides Easthampton, and you know what works in other communities. I think your decision-making on programming, for instance, where we have now, we don't have enough square footage to do what I'd really like to do, or we're missing this facility.
Right.
And I have a great experience that was so successful at this. That's why you should be on the programming thing, because I think you add an expertise that the rest of us don't have.
Well, let me just state publicly that I'm relatively new at leading a senior center. I've been doing it since October 2021. Before that, my work with senior centers and seniors and area agencies on aging was as a social worker and community organizer, but not at all involved in the programming of senior centers. So for me, what I would be bringing to this are my research skills, my facilitation skills, and then what I've learned in my training. We've certainly had a lot of training in the last couple of years on what we could be doing as senior centers. And then my personal passion for making sure that senior centers have a big citizen engagement component, but I'm not, your experienced, what I call cruise ship leader at senior centers. So
Still no
yes,
more than
I should
all of
be,
us.
I should be involved. I should be involved, but we don't in Easthampton have like a 20-year veteran of leading senior centers, except for our partially retired former senior center director. So, and in some ways that's good. And I think I was brought on to this whole effort of having the Easthampton Council on Aging because of my interest in how do we modernize it and what do the people like me who are 57 or other people coming up in their 40s want to see in their senior center that they're building to be their new senior center. So just to clarify what it is that I bring, I would say of any of us in the room, Crystal has been assistant director of the Northampton. So she's brought that. And then at Christopher Heights and before that, Lathrop, and then other work that she's done, she's got the depth. So is there anybody that I didn't put on a working group? I don't think so. And Dan?
I want to make sure I'm on center visits,
Okay,
moving off of visioning.
yeah.
Joe was going to be on visioning.
Joe's going to be on building program. Do you also want to be on the logistics for those visioning sessions?
the visioning piece of it, the big marketing piece, I want to be on that.
All right, you want to do both?
I'm less, given the expertise in the program and the building needed to house it,
Mhm.
I just assume yield that to you guys.
Okay, all right, so Leslie from the top. Site selection, Tom, Patrick, Chuck, vision, and Dan? No, Tom, Patrick, Chuck.
Yep.
Visioning process, Cindy, Stella, Joe. Center visits, Leslie, Sandy, and Dan. Building program, Crystal, Cindy, and Dawn. And then we will ask Kathy Schweitzer to join visioning process as well. Okay, and then we can start with that. And if it doesn't go well, or we want to bring on another working group, we can do that. I didn't want to spread us too thin.
So I have a suggestion.
Yes.
Since these are the chair's ideas, would the chair define each of these for us? In other words,
Yes.
you change the name of the visioning process to creative, whatever that was.
Right. Right.
Just say, so the committee knows what you were thinking our tasks are.
Yes.
And what's
Okay. So,
what's the mission
Right.
of each of
Mission
these groups?
task.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's sort of like just a one sentence
and we
about
have
the
time.
missions.
and we have time. So
and
let's,
the scope of the
Okay.
activities.
all right. And please chime in if you want to contribute to how we're defining this. So my first thought, so the most immediate thing is the visioning meeting. So we could call that, visioning sessions work group, if you want to call it that, if that makes more sense. So the goal in my mind, based on what I heard, was that we would have our first community visioning session in early summer, if we could get it to happen, maybe later in the summer. It would have been nice to do it in the spring, but spring's already here and doesn't give us enough time. And so my goal for that would be that I kick us off by research, since I'm the only staff person on this, that I kick it off by researching some possible facilitators and that have some especially experience with this kind of process. And then it's March. I'd like to see us report back to this group in April, preferably over May, so that we would have met by then at least once, maybe twice, to even if it's just like a quick video meeting, to move this along so that we get to the point of having a community visioning session as soon as possible, and then come back and talk with this group about the plan and what it would look like, and see if this group thinks that we should have more than one, or that we should segment this out. Maybe we have one group that's like a big one session that's a big meeting, maybe another is a small focus group at the senior center.
That's what
You
your
know,
committee's gonna
But that's
decide.
what this committee would decide, recommendations, bring it back to the larger group just to take the pulse on that. Dan?
Question on this. We're hiring a facilitator.
Yes.
You're gonna work with the mayor on that process?
Yes.
So what, if I understand you correctly, this committee will come back to the full committee and suggest person A, person B, person C. They're all available. You would research availability and who the visioning process committee would suggest would be the facilitator. Because if we want to get I'm a guy who looks at practical things. If you want to get this started, have a meeting in June, we have to market that.
Right.
This person has to be hired in May.
Yeah.
So you're taking care of how that process is, budget and all that stuff.
Right. And if it looks like June is too soon, we can put it out to July or August or September.
I'm
There's,
using your suggestion.
yeah. I mean, we can put it out further, but the goal would be not just to get enough people there, but to have a really well facilitated meeting. So it's worth the money and everybody's time.
Might want more than one.
Yes. And we might want more than one.
So you get the information that you're really looking for. I mean, other than, letting people just come in and, I don't want to say complain, but, we should have definite goals of what information are we trying to get from whom, so we don't miss anybody.
Right. Right. And I think the purpose of this session, given what I heard a couple of months ago in this body, was that we wanted more information so that we didn't spin off with possible rough drafts of a new senior center and get to the point of giving that to to an appointed building committee that's really far off from what the community wants, or that there might be there are totally different parts of the community, some of which want a senior center, some of which might not go till they're 80, and really haven't put much thought into it. And we wanted to make sure that we could touch as many people as we could with this. But, we also have limited time. This committee is just supposed to act for about a year. So, we have to be realistic and do what we can and learn from other communities about what they did to gather this information from their communities. So that's what this committee will do. And I'd like to see us at least give an update at the next meeting of this body, April 23rd, on how far we've gotten.
Which gives you enough time to meet as a subgroup.
Yes,
That's great.
absolutely. Okay, so moving on, unless anybody has any questions about that work group. Okay, so the site selection work group. I wish Tom was here today because I know he had some thoughts about what that work group could work on. Because that could look, as when we met with the mayor, the very initial meeting of this subcommittee, it wasn't ruled out that people from this committee could go out into the world, look at sites, talk with local business owners and community members about potential sites. That's not off the table, but at the same time, we don't have a lot of resources to do real estate development in this area. Patrick, do you want to say anything about what maybe that group could do in the time frame we're talking about of the next couple months?
I mean, I would think we would start to just look and see what's available as far as space in the city. I mean, I made a note right here. Is there a list of available city property currently that's there, just to have a guide as to what we need? And then I think the next question would be like, how many acres of space do we need? Does it need to be in downtown? Does it need to be here? So I think those are some of the things that I would think our group will kind of be tasked with.
So then that group will be integrated that group will be needing the research from the center visit group,
Right.
Because each of those centers is 4.5 acres, 1 story, 3 acres, 2 stories, or whatever. And it will also need information as we go along from the building program people who might come up with, we're never having a 2-story center or whatever it is, Dan.
Yeah.
I was going to ask Pat, is non-city property on the list? I mean, Chuck
I would say,
might know
yeah.
what's available out
Oh,
there.
yeah, yeah.
And I would love to hear, well, if we bought this property, it's gonna cost us $1 million.
I agree.
And I think that kind of information, are we supposed to, Cindy, at the end of this process, recommend a site or recommend a couple of sites? Because we know what acreage we need, et cetera. Aren't we supposed to do that to the building committee?
I
We
thought so.
we don't buy the site.
No.
No, just make.
No, but we were supposed to
Yeah.
make
Because that's the
recommendations.
first thing we can have to do as a building committee when whoever's on that, buy it.
Right.
So how much it would cost would be a
Yes.
big thing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
And then, I know that there are resources within City Hall to help us with, things like this type of site opens you up to these kinds of risks. Like
Right.
say you have to do a tear down, this or whatever it is.
Yeah.
This kind of site, is like an ideal site that you should be looking for, but we know that would cost more or whatever, so we can get some resource help from
Yeah.
City Hall. And even though I'm not on that committee, I can help facilitate the flow of information. Any other questions about
No,
site
I would just
selection?
agree with Dan 100% as far as, again, my first note was just what's available for the city, but it would absolutely include like Joe's house looks like a great piece of land. Maybe we'll buy Joe's house and we'll use that piece of land for the project.
Joe has a 4-acre proproperty?
Were you,
Maybe I
was was that you the other day over next to this?
Mind a bed? No. But absolutely, like keeping our options open. Yeah. So that's what I would envision what we would be coming up with. for
Right,
you.
with your outside goal being
Right.
that a few months before this committee disbands, we need time to sift through
Yeah.
your recommendations
Correct. See
and,
What's
and
really viable.
and make a formal kind of statement of, if this, then this, if this, then this, if this, then this, and
Yep.
here's what we're sending you. Okay. So next, the center visits. So having done this with the Council on Aging Board, we know it takes a lot of time to make these appointments with other centers, or if they're not a center yet, with their project lead. For example, Hilltowns last we heard,
Mhm.
they weren't building a center, but they have a whole process that we can learn from versus, going to a place that's been in operations for 2 or 3 years. So it takes time to make it happen. What I would recommend for that group is that you think about what you want to get out of the visit before you go. And Joe could actually help a little bit with that, because whatever director or program person over there that you meet with or board members, they have top of mind, what their issues were, and you might get into the weeds too much in your appointment with them over something that, might take up a lot of the time, and you wanted to talk about some other things. Or you might not be able to see the place really in action because of the time you go or whatever. So just think about what you want to get out of it. And then, does anybody have any, and so with these center visits, if you started doing them, let's just say April, because it's going to take time to make appointments, do you want direction from the committee about, where to go? Do you guys want to just kick this off and do your own research? It's up to you how you would want to kick this off. I'm going to go to Leslie because she's raised a hand.
Oh, okay, hi Leslie.
I think one other thing that's important to ask whomever we visit is, what would they have done differently in hindsight,
Oh, yeah.
That's a good
and
point.
why?
Great question.
Yeah. Dan?
We'd be happy to take the lead on this because it's going to be, be great if we all went together to these sites, and I'd be happy to take the lead in getting from Joe. If you have contacts, Joe, with the places you visited, and then we could meet virtually, the three of us, to see what do we want to look for. For instance, I like what Joe got here for South Hadley. What does the facility have if it's a brand new facility? And then the processes are already done by the board. I mean, how they went about getting the funds, how they spent, how much did they spend. So I'm more interested in programming and facility, but that's the kind of thing we can decide as a subcommittee.
And you can also get information from Dawn and I on our contacts, because some of the contacts, even like directors, have left and new people have come on from the last time we visited Hadley, South Hadley, and, you know, we can help you with contacts, and we can also do the introductions. So,
Okay.
yeah,
So
if
the
you
first
want.
thing I'm going to ask is that, it's Leslie and Sandy,
Yeah, and you.
contact me with your availability for a first meeting, which might happen later on this month. And then we'll set up availability on how we're going to go about visiting.
And Dawn, do you have any suggestions for this group, having done some of these center visits and
I mean, probably you, Joe, or I could talk about the centers we feel like are the best comps for what we're doing. I think some of the ones, like I thought South Hadley was really interesting. I think Hadley is really interesting based on size. I didn't go to, was it Longmeadow that you guys went to?
Ludlow at Longmeadow,
Yeah.
those two?
So I think,
Ludlow, you missed, Ludlow was wonderful.
I know, and that's what I heard. So I missed that one, but I think both like size comparable and community, like there's a lot of factors. So the two that stood out to me and the ones we visited are South Hadley and Hadley, but Ludlow sounds like one. I don't know if you guys have another.
And there were many we didn't visit yet, like Holyoke and other
Yeah.
places. that
Can
have
you
been
guys just
recommended.
write to me, or the three of us, these things? I mean, tell us what you thought were the best places you've seen. I would rather go to facilities that are built, not in process. Because I want to ask the question that Leslie said, what would you do differently now that you've got this new facility? That's a great question.
Yeah, top of everybody's mind is going to be storage. Yes,
Went
Sandy.
to Greenfield last year, and they're very unhappy. And I think it's fairly new. I don't know how many years it's been up, but they're very disappointed in the way their new building went up. So there's some things, I didn't write it down at the time, but I have family in Greenfield, so I guess we all could go to Greenfield.
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to decide.
Yeah.
What we're gonna do.
For postmortem.
Also, as a Franklin County resident, let me just say, we want this process, this is an open public meeting. We want this process to be respectful of other communities. They're all going to have pros and cons to their sites. They're all going to have, I just heard about an incredibly beautiful, wonderful center that the geothermal has never worked at, and it's been a nightmare from day one. I don't know, because it was a virtual meeting and I didn't hear the location, but one of the considerations to keep in mind as you're visiting centers to look for is how are those communities now managing those facilities? Is it on the senior center staff to manage them? Does their DPW manage them? You will find a mix of things, and to think about Easthampton and what it would take to run certain kinds of complex modern systems. We were shown the guts of buildings by some of the places, and so really it's not just what you see people dancing in or eating in, it's really also the guts of the building operations. And so I would just encourage you to think about that as well. All righty. Thank you, Patrick. And I see that we have 2 minutes left. Thank you so much, Patrick.
I'll catch up with you guys later. Thank you.
Okay, so then I think the last one is the building program. So Crystal and Dawn and I, and then if there's somebody else from the board, but not necessarily right away, we could meet even virtually and kind of bang out like, how do we want to make use of this, and what is it that we would report back to this group and or the Council on Aging board, which is, really more in charge of, what does our Council on Aging offer the community? I mean, we could do both, but mainly we just need to kind of break down how should we use our time on this group so that when we get to the appointed building committee, they know what our recommendations are for the city of Easthampton for the direction we should be heading in. Now, I also want to say that Tom mentioned at one of these meetings, I don't remember if it was this meeting or the Council on Aging board, he said, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me paraphrasing him, sometimes you need to build something that can be used in the future that you don't necessarily plan to use immediately or use in its fullest way. So let me just give an example. Could be having a full-on kitchen and dining room might not mean that we cook and serve a meal every day at first if we haven't secured the whole plan and funding for that. That's a whole separate project, is designing a meal plan as opposed to occasional meals, community functions, bringing in the Highland Valley meals or some other. So this team isn't necessarily going to design from 0 all the way to 100 exactly what the senior center will be, but we're going to be talking about it and talking about the options and educating this committee about what does it mean for space-wise to have this option, or this option. You know, these 3 people sitting here aren't going to decide right now in this committee what kind of dining program will we have, but we'll be talking about helping this committee and the community understand, well, what are the options? Joe?
I mean, that sounds like, you know, you're building a building and then you've got a program which needs to fit inside the building, but how do you make sure that you've got enough space so that down the road, your program can expand to meet different needs in the community? And then you'll have room to run the program, as opposed to, you know, building a building and then people saying, well, you know, money's tight and what do you need that for? What do you need this for? Why do we have extra space over here? Or what's this extra space? You know, so it's like making the case for having some
So
flexibility.
Dawn and then Sandy.
No, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I don't know how you all and you two in particular feel, but my ideal plan would be to think about like what we would ideally want, both for what we have now and what we see as growth for the future,
Yep.
because we can take away from it. But I feel like instead of starting with, you know, what do we have right now and what are our constraints, and what I feel like ideally we would come up with, what do we think an ideal senior center in Easthampton would look like for, say, the next 50 years? And then
50 years.
I mean, you know, I feel like planning out too far is a bigger guess, but I also think the reality is if we build a nicer building, more people will come to it. So there's an element that we can't totally predict. So I like what you said, Joe, but I feel like I would want to talk about like, what do we think should ideally be there? We can always take back from that.
I was going to agree. It's very important that we understand 50 years is a legitimate time frame for how long this building needs to last. That's what we did with the schools. And in 50 years, seniors will have different things they need. So if you don't build it now, you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
So if you don't build the kitchen, there's not going to be a kitchen added in 10 years.
Right.
So I would suggest that you, and this is a combination of all the committees. When we go to see other communities and we say, hey, South Hadley had this and this. I know we don't have that program, but what do you think, Cindy, about adding this in the future? Because I think trying to envision the future is something that it's hard to do.
Right. And sorry, let me just mute Leslie real quick. And just so you know, so some of the centers where they have a full-on kitchen and dining program, you know, might say South Hadley maybe made a mistake that they didn't put in a full-on kitchen. They have sort of a catering kitchen. But you know, I wouldn't necessarily have been educated enough to know, just as not a dining expert and meal expert, to walk in. I wouldn't have even known that wasn't a full kitchen that you would need for, you know, so there is a lot of research to do. Crystal, do you have anything to say about how you think this task group should function and what could be its goals and like, what should be its deadline for reporting back?
I think that it's definitely, I think after touring Longmeadow and seeing the indoor, outdoor space and how many people are utilizing the center in Longmeadow and that it's in a residential neighborhood, I think that is, I think, in my opinion, having been to a lot of the newer senior centers. My most favorite senior center in the whole state is in Bellingham. They did a fantastic job with staff space and community space and dining space and multi-purpose rooms. And you can even visit their Facebook page, the Bellingham Senior Center Facebook page, and look at their building. So a lot of these you don't have to go in person, but I definitely think that speaking to the staff about how each space is utilized is really important, because when I was in Northampton, we had a gold LEED certified building, but it was heated and cooled by these wells in the basement, and we had one person that we had to send from our central service department. We had to send one person to get trained on how to operate the heating and cooling system for the Northampton Senior Center. And when he was on vacation, there was nobody that knew how to do it in his absence. And we didn't have access to this laptop that controlled the heating and cooling. So the temperature in that building was forever a nightmare. And the visioning committee had said that, or maybe it was the programming committee had said that they wanted the adult day health center so that people who were caring for family members with Alzheimer's disease and dementia could have their loved one at adult day health at the center while they were participating in activities. And then the adult day center never came to fruition, but they have a bathroom that is adjacent to the room that had a shower in it that didn't even get used by anybody. And they had a wall that would split their activity space so that they could make it more multi-purpose, but when the wall was up, it didn't provide enough space to have really an activity because of the noise. It would disrupt the activity next door. So I think that that's really important, is speaking to the staff and seeing what they would do differently and why, because that's going to be the best thing that we can do as far as visioning for the future.
That's pretty much center visits.
Yeah, yes, so the center visits and the building program, as Don suggested earlier, kind of feed off each other in some ways, but also because of the people we have on this building program, like the use of the senior center committee have some experience, that'll be helpful too. And, and then also there's different models for senior centers. There's standalone senior centers, and there's senior centers that are paired with or integrated with a community center or a library. And there are examples of those. We've already started talking with those people. Upton has the combination library, senior center, with I think a community fitness room, and there's an experience there about the size of that and how well is it working. So there are a lot of different examples of different kinds of things that we can look at as well, and we can report out on those. So okay, it's 108. So we went through what each of these groups would do. Obviously, we didn't totally define, so we'll ask each of those work groups, just take a moment when you get together to kind of define when are you going to come back and meet with the whole group, and set yourself some deadlines to keep things apace. And it's okay if you don't do everything that you want to do before you come back and report. An interim report is okay. And then you can rely on me if you have questions, wait, what are we using our time for, if I can be helpful. So why don't we,
Cindy, can I just quickly say that it would probably be helpful to have somebody that works there at the center to go on visits with us, because they know this won't work or this will work.
Yeah.
So I would like to add somebody.
Yeah. So what we
You mean
could,
somebody from your staff?
Yeah.
so what we could do is, when you come up with these visits and these appointments, just share them with me, and then I'll see if I can send somebody, if not myself, from our staff to come along and at least be in a, because not all of us could go every time. We already know, because we tried that. But we do have a lot of staff who can help. Okay, so does somebody want to make a motion to
So
adjourn?
moved.
All right. Second, you have to second? Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much,
We have
everybody.
to vote.
Oh, we have to vote it. We have to vote it. Oh, that's why you're doing this.
Leslie, for adjournment, say yes. Let's go.
Yes.
Cindy, Joe.
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
I'm happy. I know the names.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. I'm going to stop recording now.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.